right, ladies and gentlemen, we are officially live. Welcome back to the Sober Grind podcast, episode number 13.
Sober Grind.
My name is Austin. I am joined by the ever so handsome and suave
Pej, only when I'm sitting next to you. Only when I'm sitting next to you. Your baby blues bring out my baby browns.
Depending which screen you're looking at on this, my eyes may have been taken out by the green screen behind us. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we are so happy to be back weekly as always. So happy to be streaming and talking about this useful content for you all. So today we are talking about the history of drugs and drug use. So this is going to be super interesting. It's going to go maybe all over the place because I have a lot of great questions. If you have a lot of great questions, leave a comment in the box below. And please don't forget to subscribe to the Sober Grind podcast. The link to that is in the description of this video. And also share it. We would love to reach more people, impact a lot more people. So let's just jump right in. Pej, the expert here. So where do you want to start with the history of drugs?
I'm far from an expert, but I'm an expert. Well, listen, I'm going to be totally transparent.
Please.
And anonymity out the window. I understand in 12-step programs you want to stay anonymous. You don't want people to. But how will people know truly? Like, if how can I sit here and talk about drugs and drug usage if I haven't quite experienced it myself too?
Right.
So I'm going to talk about why I even came up with this topic, why I wanted to talk about this today, because
I think it's super interesting.
We talk about recovery all the time. We talk about people losing their lives to addiction, and we always talk about the success stories, and that's great. That's fine and dandy. But what is it that we haven't really talked about? The drugs themselves, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a good point.
First of all, are we on that camera, or that camera, or all three cameras?
All three cameras.
All three. Hello. I'm just gonna talk to all three cameras. So the reason that I came up with this is that over the weekend I had this thought. I thought where did it all start? How did I even get turned on to drugs? Why was it? What was it within me that thought that I needed to actually go and experiment with drugs? I remember growing up in Utah, without even knowing what drugs were. I remember in a high school, it was in a junior high school health class, they as they do in most health classes in junior high schools and high schools, they talk about drug use, right?
Yeah.
And I remember DARE and things like that. But there was actually I remember them showing this video footage of a guy on PCP.
Interesting.
And he was he had this outrageous amount of strength, and he went crazy. I don't know if anybody else ever saw that. He went crazy, so immediately that instilled some kind of fear in me. But then they talked about sniffing inhalants and things like that, and don't do them because they're highly dangerous. So of course, curious Pej that I was, very uncomfortable in my own skin, I wanted to experiment. I wanted to see what is it. And I remember back then they had this stuff called Rush that you inhaled it and would get you high for a few minutes and kind of take you out of right here, right now, and just give you this quick head rush.
Well, what is that?
To this day, I'm not even sure what it was, but all I know is that it would give you a major rush, right? And it was very temporary, very, very quick acting, and it wouldn't last more than 20 seconds, right? So we had to take it to another level. They said there was we would sniff all kinds of inhalants. They said, don't sniff the whiteout. So we sniffed the whiteout. It would get you kind of high.
Yeah.
Then other things like gasoline, huffing gas. They said, don't do that. It sounds absurd, but kids will sniff stuff to get off. Whether it be...
Sure, anything that you're told not to do is an inclination to do it.
That's right. If the grass says don't walk on the grass, some kids will stomp on the grass, right? So I definitely, I was curious. I was mowing lawns and I started sniffing gas, and I sniffed so much until I went into the other side. And when you go into the other side, it's like a whole other world. You basically see a lot of things. It's sort of like you're hallucinating a bit, and it takes you out of right here, right now, into another world. So that was my first experience really with getting loaded on something and it wasn't really the most normal drug. There's not a lot of people out there sniffing gas, right? So obviously, and then there's king alcohol. Alcohol is always readily available. It's either in your wine cabinet, it's in your household, alcohol, and I grew up in Utah, and still, regardless of the fact that most of the people were Mormon in Utah, alcohol was around. We would do anything we could. Even though they didn't sell it on Sundays, they still sold it on all the other days of the week. So we would go into various stores, and we'd get alcohol, and we'd drink alcohol. Mm-hmm. I mean, however that may be. I'd go to weddings. There was always alcohol readily available, so I drank at weddings, and I was a curious child. Once I got a little bit in me, it wasn't like I just wanted to stop right there. You get a little buzz going, it takes you out of right here, right now again. So then you feel good and you want to do some more. And and then for a while I was just chasing it. Obviously, marijuana. The history of marijuana, we know that marijuana's been around for centuries, right? Alcohol's been around for a long time too. So what happened? Between the weed and the alcohol, it was really cool to smoke weed because again, it gave you it gave you this warm sensation that just overtook your whole head and made you feel like, this is great. I feel happy. Everything is enhanced. The music sounds better. The movie looks more entertaining.
Sure.
Everything just feels better, right? And it definitely, like for a lot of kids, like especially in my household, with a lot of the stuff that was going on in our household, it took me out of right here, right now. It was a great escape, right? I look at, during that time, obviously, it was in the 80s, and we'd already had our hippie phase in the 60s and, the 70s. And at that time, growing up, I was kind of in high school, and I remember we were experimenting with acid.
Sure.
The Grateful Dead were still really big.
Yeah.
I remember I had moved out here to California. I remember getting this pamphlet from UCI that said kids that do acid and ecstasy have a deeper thought process. And they're
interesting.
They have a more open mind to things in life. And automatically, me, who's already experimenting with drugs, that became a green light for me to just take off and do as much as I can.
Wow.
So I was doing acid, I was doing ecstasy, and during that time, like the rave scene was growing. It was really big. A lot of people were selling ecstasy, acid, doing mushrooms, all the hallucinogens. Yes.
Well, just pause you for a minute. It's interesting you bring that up. I've heard a lot of talk recently about bringing psilocybin mushrooms and small doses of LSD back into clinical use for use in addiction and mental health issues and struggles with that.
Right.
Not to sidetrack you, I just wanted to kind
It's not a sidetrack at all. Actually,
I
I read about it the other day. I heard about it the other day in the news that is it's being talked about again. Obviously, did you know that ecstasy? From the research I did back then when I was experimenting with drugs, I looked up ecstasy. I wanted to see where did it originate from? What did they use it for? Supposedly marriage family counselors when it was still legal, would give it to their clients to help them bond better. Because ecstasy gives you this euphoric, I love you feeling, I just love everybody around me, and I love you, and I just want to hug you and kiss you and whatever, So a lot of people that were, having troubles in their marriage, they'd go to their therapist, and the therapist would prescribe them this. Then I think that the FDA kind of stepped in, and there was no way, we can't have this. This is totally illegal, and they made it illegal. So that's that. Again, back to the 80s. So here I am, a 16, 17-year-old kid that's doing a lot of hallucinogens. Cocaine comes onto the scene. And during that time, I don't know if you've done, if you know about what was going on, was that the crack epidemic was becoming really big. I mean, down in South Central, there was a lot of people that were selling crack on the streets, and there's rumors of how that got there, but we won't talk about that today.
Sure.
But, a lot of people were getting zombified, and they were getting addicted to crack to the point where, as kids down in Orange County, a few of our friends happened to get our hand on some cocaine, and we snorted cocaine, and that was I remember before I ever tried coke, I remember hearing that you try cocaine one time, you're automatically addicted. And so, of course, I had to make sure, I had to see if that was truly true.
In your opinion, was it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the second I tried it, it was on and popping. I mean, it was an ongoing thing. We were seeking it. We were getting it. We had somebody that always made it available to us. Before you know it, we were staying up in hotel rooms, motel rooms, wherever we could do it all night long.
Yeah.
And it would go hand in hand with alcohol because they would enhance each other. The more that you drank, the more you could feel the cocaine and just go all night long and keep drinking.
Wow.
And vice versa. You would actually feel the effects of alcohol more intensified because one is a stimulant, one's a depressant. Together, it was just like a perfect partying drug. At least that's what we thought at that time, until the next day.
Yeah, of course.
The next day was always the come down, right?
Right, yeah.
A lot of depression.
Sure, horrible, yeah.
A lot of ill feelings, a lot of guilt, shame, remorse. So as we kept going on, throughout time, I remember that during that time, I started getting into steroids. Why is that? Because not only was I not comfortable with right here, right now, I wasn't comfortable with what was going on within. There was this void within me that needed to be filled. And however that could be, whether I needed to make myself look better on the outside and think that people like me for my muscles. So I started doing steroids. Here I am, this kid, doing steroids, smoking weed before I went to the gym, and then doing cocaine all Friday and Saturday night and partying up. So it was just like I was a trash can. I was just putting tons of drugs in my body. The history was building, right?
Right.
Get off the steroids, what happens? You can't work out as hard, you start eating more, you're smoking weed, you get the munchies, and all of a sudden I become
Endless cycle.
fat, right? So I become overweight.
Ruthless cycle.
So what was going on then at that time? People were doing meth. At that time, they just called it crystal meth, right? It was, the street name was called crank. And the way that crank originated, well, crystal meth within itself, if you really ever study history, it was, I believe the Chinese were the ones that created it.
Really?
Yes, and then
I didn't know that.
And then Hitler was
Interesting.
giving it to his soldiers to keep them up longer, to become more agitated, to eat less, and to be more
Wow.
combative. So,
Wow.
and from what I understand, he was giving it to them in their food. So now it makes its way over here to the States.
Never heard that.
And during that time, a lot of the biker gangs were sneaking it in the crank shaft of their motorcycles.
Is that where the nickname came from?
Crank. And
Got
that
it.
back then it was just straight crystal methamphetamines. There was different makeups of it, but mostly you snorted it. Some people would shoot it. You didn't smoke it much, but over a period of time that migrated into glass. And that was more cleaned with, they would clean it with acetone, and it was smokable. And then a higher form of that was ice, which later kind of made its way mostly out to Hawaii. Now it's found in the Midwest. There's ice all over the place, you know.
Yeah, I know, it's a
now,
big problem
I've
out
neglected the big H word because during that time, there wasn't a lot of people doing heroin. At least not during the time that I was growing up in the 80s. There wasn't a lot of people in our circle doing heroin. Heroin has been around for years and years. People have been doing it, you know, in America since the 60s and 70s, maybe even longer. But I didn't see a lot of heroin at that time, right? There was like a few friends that were doing heroin, and to us, they were the junkies, although we were all, to a certain extent, junkies.
So heroin's been a more recent thing
Heroin, like, this is what I saw.
in
So
America, anyway.
in America, well, no, it's been around. There's always been heroin addicts, right, for a long time. Just not around our circle at that time. Perhaps because we were in an area where some of the people were either middle class or upper class. It was more kids were getting into cocaine and speed and things like that. Speed back then was mostly a West Coast thing. You didn't really find it in the Midwest much. You didn't find it, although before the actual crystal meth that was out, there was medical speed, which was called Whitey's, cross tops. They were in a pill form. They would keep you up all night.
And they were prescribed?
They were prescribed.
Like caffeine, like heavy duty caffeine pills?
Heavy duty.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty much. But they weren't just prescribed. They were also prescribed by street doctors too. That were,
Well, sure,
they
yeah,
had their own
street
version
doctor,
of prescribing
yeah.
them, right? But you know, over a period of time, so speed just kept on becoming more and more and more intense. And I remember there was a time when somebody that I know very closely was taking stuff out to Hawaii and distributing it, and it was ice, and that somebody was wondering, like, how many people's lives am I ruining with this? And it turned out down the line, in the 90s, 1 in 8 people in Hawaii was addicted to ice.
That high?
That high.
1 in 8?
That makes it a complete epidemic. So, I mean, there is a place in Hawaii called Tent City that's just a lot of,
Yeah.
you know, tweakers that are all, you know, methed out, addicted to ice. So it's sad.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, I remember, like, in my late 20s, I had a roommate who had moved in with me, and he was, you know, a one of a kind. He was a partier. He liked to party really hard. He would go up to LA a lot. I was living in Orange County. He'd go up to LA a lot and go, you know, for the whole weekend. This is like the first time I actually saw somebody that not only was addicted to heroin, but then died and had an overdose on heroin. So I'm in my mid-20s. His girlfriend calls me, says that he's up at his dealer's house up in Hollywood, and he had overdosed on heroin.
Wow.
And they were afraid to call the authorities, so they just basically watched him die there. That was like my
That's
first
terrible.
experience with that, and that was in
Yeah.
my mid-20s. Now, me, at the time, I'm doing other drugs. I ended up going to that guy's funeral high. A lot of people that go to their friends' funerals when they overdose are probably high. A lot of their friends, because obviously they were.
Is it because they don't want to deal with the situation?
No, they were hanging out with
just...
these people in the first place, so it's not like they just stopped being addicts.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But they do want to come and pay the respect and pay.
Sure.
You know, they're remorseful. They're sad. Part of them definitely wants to go and support their friend.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I remember I got high in the parking lot of my friend's funeral, so that happens. As time went on, you know, pretty much I tried to do everything I could except for PCP. I never messed with PCP because of that one video that I saw in health class in junior high school that had just stuck with me and scared the crap out of me. Although we tried mescaline, which is kind of a different form of it. But as time progressed, finally...
comes out of a cactus, right?
I believe so, yes.
Interesting.
My demise
Watched a movie about that.
was meth. I call it the devil's dandruff. By the time I was in my 30s, I had done a lot of meth. I had a nice case of meth mouth. I had smoked it. I had snorted it. I had done everything. I put it in my body in every possible way that I could. And it had gotten me arrested. It had got me thrown in jail. And finally, when I went to treatment, it was because of meth. It was because of drinking. It was because of all different drugs. But that was, you know, that was it. That was the icing on the cake and what had just brought me to my knees to the point where I wanted to get help. Now, my first day in treatment...
Wait, let's pause right there.
Right.
We'll leave this on a cliffhanger.
Sure.
Because we've got a lot of watchers. I want to take this brief moment, since we have some people in here, to answer any questions. Do we have any questions about anything Pej has talked about so far?
Ask me questions.
Or drug use in general, the history of drugs, anything like that. We got one guy...
I used to do that trucker speed back in the 80s. That's right.
Yeah.
It was either called jet fuel or biker dope. They call it biker dope or trucker dope, right?
Yeah.
Because the truck drivers, they need to stay up all night long in the diesels, so like they would do that stuff.
Wow. I've heard a lot of business professional startups as well have gone to cocaine and to speed and all these things because, you know, it starts as caffeine pills and lots of caffeine because they want to work because, you know, they're on that grind.
A lot of professionals are into
cocaine. More money
cocaine.
And then it gets into cocaine and speed.
And it was more expensive back then than the speed. The speed was kind of more, you know, grimy, but, you know, I know a lot of people that were high class that got into speed too, and they became low bottom, you know, tweakers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone have any questions? No? Up?
That was some carpet dope, yeah. Do you know what he means by that?
I can only assume.
So when people were doing speed, often little pieces of it would fall into the carpet, and then the tweakers would go with like a magnifying glass and a helmet with the light on.
With a helmet?
Oh yeah, helmet and a light. Because that's, you know.
Oh, interesting.
You ever watch Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
We were Breaking Bad before it was even thought of being a show. But
Gotcha.
They'll find little morsels on the ground and they'll go put it in their pipe and try and smoke it. And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you just get carpet.
Sometimes you get a little crumb of some food, a cornflake or something.
Gotcha.
Ain't that right, Richard? So,
we got a few of my son's friends were doing drug in the parking lot at the funeral home.
Right? So Rhonda says it right there. So over a period, okay, so when I entered rehab, and I'll keep this short, I remember my first day in rehab, there was 5 guys in there. They were all kicking methadone. Methadone. So they're talking to me about, I'm in here quitting methadone, and I'm thinking like, well, I mean, I'd heard of methadone, but I wasn't a heroin addict to know like really what methadone was. I'm like, really, meth? Yeah, me too. They're like, no, methadone. You don't understand. Like, this is to get off of heroin.
Addicted to the thing that was supposed to help them get off of heroin.
I come to learn down at that time that methadone is more addictive than heroin, and it's harder to kick than heroin, and the kick is harder than that. I watched these guys go through some of the most excruciatingly painful times of their lives. I'm talking like hot baths and Epsom salt and pain in the bones in their legs. And
can't even imagine.
So I asked them, like, what was it? And they said basically at that time that opioid craze was going on. They were doing oxys, the 80 milligrams. I myself was selling them back then, but I never touched them. I was more of an upper guy than a downer guy. So I didn't get it, but I got the fact that like I could make money off of it, which I did. Now these guys were all coming off of the methadone. That was a direct result of them using the oxys, right? So now they were kicking that. None of them stayed sober. Very sad to say, but none of them stayed sober. To this day, I don't know what happened to them. Hopefully, some of them ended up getting sober, but I probably would have heard about it because they were we were from the same region, for better sake of words. But then over a period of time, obviously I stayed sober, and then I went to school and I learned all pharmacology. We took that all those classes in school and learned all about drugs and the different components and what it's all made of and all this, that,
Because I
and the
got
other.
some questions for you.
I'll do my best. But what I started to see is when I started working in treatment and I worked in an adolescent facility, was kids coming in that were smoking oxys, smoking Oxycontin. Okay, and I never knew that anybody would smoke a pill.
Right.
But that's what these guys were doing. Some of them were smoking them, some of them were taking them, and I'd find out, where do you get these? Why are they so accessible to young kids? From their parents or grandparents' medicine cabinets. Pretty much.
Absolutely.
That's where it would start, and then they would seek it out. They'd find street dealers and things like that. But obviously, a lot of people that are prescribed for whatever pain, when they can't get the oxys anymore, they move on to heroin. On the West Coast, it's black tar heroin.
Yeah.
On the East Coast, it's China White.
Yeah, I know in my town.
Where's your town?
Point Pleasant, New Jersey, and Brick, New Jersey.
It's all white, China White.
Well, yeah, but what leads to that is in my high school, they were called blues, which is what led to them. Which is I forget what they were. They were just blue pills that were prescribed to get off of heroin.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure what those were, but that's what a lot of people started with, was those pills, raiding them from parents' cabinets, just like that. And then when they couldn't get any more, it led to heroin. And there's
usually
so much
always
heroin in New Jersey.
They usually
It's
always turn to
terrible.
heroin. So then I started working, in adult facilities, and I noticed that pretty much from 2009 to 2010, from there on, the majority of the clients that I would get from across this nation, from Baltimore, from Maine, from Delaware, from Rhode Island, from Connecticut, from the Midwest, were heroin addicts. The highest percentage of our clients were heroin addicts. Most of the people that were much older that came to treatment were alcoholics. Okay, a lot of there wasn't a lot of cocaine addicts. There were some meth addicts or some polysubstance like cross addiction, meth and heroin addicts, but majority was heroin, and obviously most recently in the last few years, fentanyl.
Pause right there.
Okay.
I want to get back in here since we have so many engaged viewers right now. Please, if this is useful for you all, if you're learning something from this mastermind over here,
I have nothing.
lots of
I'm
experience.
like Socrates. The only thing I know is
The only
that
thing
I don't know.
you know nothing. Please consider sharing this video. Just share it on your Facebook wall. Tag a friend in a post. We're trying to reach out and positively impact as many people as possible. Also, if you have not checked it out yet, please click the link in the description of this video to check out the Sober Grind episode. This is episode number 13. We have 12 other awesome episodes of content through there. We're also on YouTube, whatnot. Hopefully this is awesome content for you. You're learning something. If you're just chiming in now, we're talking about the history of drugs and drug use. Pej has been laying it all out. Please stay tuned, share this video, tag a friend that might be interested, and continue to leave your questions and comments. So, please continue, Pej.
Well, I mean, this was mostly my history with what I've seen with drugs. Obviously, there's been a long, vast, huge amount of history with drug use in our country and in our world, right? But personally, these were my experiences. I did heroin for a while. I've had to try that, right? And it was highly addictive. I remember when I did heroin, I realized why they said heroin is so addictive.
Yeah.
I
It's a oncer, right?
I tried-
One time and addicted.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. I mean, the taste, everything about it, once you do it, you can't get enough of it. And then opium, too. I mean, from the old country, like Iranian opium, Afghani opium, that stuff was a different type of body high that the kick from that, when I say the kick, the withdrawals from that were, I'm talking I was praying to the porcelain god. I was just laying by the toilet, puking, sweating,
Porcelain god.
shivering, all of it. I mean, to the point where I called my cousin and I said, "What's wrong? Why do I feel this way?" And he said, "You're addicted. You're kicking right now." I'm like, I never want to do this again. So that was difficult. But what I do see now, obviously, is now the epidemic isn't just ice in Hawaii. In this country, it's heroin, it's meth, and it's fentanyl now, and people are cutting the dope with fentanyl, which is really sad
Yeah, I want
and
to.
highly addictive. Yes.
Well, let's dive into fentanyl a little bit. This is, as far as I'm aware, pretty recent that this epidemic for specifically fentanyl came to be. You're the biggest Prince fan I know, and I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this also are Prince fans and know that tragic situation that he overdosed on fentanyl. What's the history of fentanyl? Where did it come from, and how did it become such a big epidemic now?
So fentanyl is an opioid, and it was created, I believe, in 1960 for testing.
Okay.
They wanted to test it, and then,
Testing what?
well, I believe that they wanted to see certain chemicals, compounds of it. They wanted to test it to see
Okay.
what its effectiveness could be, because already there was other different types of opioids that they were already using. I think for medicinal purposes, that's what the intention was. Down the line, what had happened was they had made fentanyl patches, which I first probably saw for the first time in like 2010, and that was for people that were suffering from pain, chronic pain, and then down the line after that, somehow people they learned how to derive the fentanyl out from, they moved it from patches to actual usage. It became like a street drug. A lot of the narcotics street dealers were putting it out there, and then now it's highly accessible, and people are cutting heroin with it, and it's much more powerful than heroin. When it comes to Prince, I mean, I know there's a lot of people that speculate and think that Prince died from for other reasons. I hate to say, and I don't usually say this or talk about it too much, but I hate to say that it's a sad thing that due to Prince, and this is my belief, I believe due to Prince is dancing in high heels and doing the splits a lot, he ended up getting a lot of hip pain, and then had to, from what I heard, get some surgeries on his hips, and then he I don't believe that Prince was an actual drug addict per se. I believe that he grew a dependency to pain medication due to his own physical ailments.
And then what tolerance went up?
And the tolerance went up, and
Right.
the rest is history.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this, that right now a lot of street dealers are dealing fentanyl. On a good note, and I'm going to say this because I know Rhonda's tuning in right now, and I just talked to her today. Rhonda's son, the person who sold her son fentanyl was just arrested, I believe, either today or yesterday, and the officer that was on his tail and was trying to catch him for a while wanted to make sure that he gets him and puts him in for a while. So he's not getting out. He got him.
Wow.
So
Great.
whoever did that to Prince and got it to his hands, because from what I understand, Prince was a accidental fentanyl overdose. So for whatever,
It's so easy to overdose on it.
he had a small body too,
It's like 100 times more potent than heroin, right?
right?
But, yeah.
Put an elephant down, right?
It's insane.
So I mean, it's out there and it's an epidemic, and I think that more people need to talk about this. More people need to be made aware of it. It needs to be known that this is what our kids are not immune from using. It's out there. There's probably people using it right now that we know, or it can happen at any given time. They could get some heroin if they're addicted to heroin, and it may be cut with fentanyl, and it's deadly. I mean, it's no joke. They could pass away. Yeah.
So I want to talk about a couple of these other kind of zombie drugs.
Right.
The bath salts and Flocka, I think it's called, which is a pretty new one. Where did those come from, and what's your opinion on those, and what do you know about those drugs?
Well, I haven't investigated them hard enough yet to know exactly what their origination
Gotcha.
is from, but I do know that it's obvious that if you look at the history of drugs over all of the decades and centuries, they just become more and more intense.
Yeah.
So when it comes
Seems that way.
to chemists mixing chemicals, some of them may be people that are drug addicts themselves and looking for the next best high, or it's just kids that are experimenting. I mean, what was it, Tide Pods? kids were recently doing Tide Pods.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a getting high thing. I just think kids are stupid.
I don't even know why they were doing that.
It's so.
I didn't even look that far into it, but it just, like I said, there was a time when I would sniff gas and whiteout to get a head change.
Yeah.
So kids will try anything.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of kids hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer. Yeah. That's definitely, I've seen actually people that become, they justify and they don't want to drink actual alcohol. So hand sanitizer, mouthwash,
rice wine vinegar, I've heard too.
Vanilla extract.
Yeah.
These all have alcohol in them.
Yeah.
So they can get a quick buzz, and some people will use those just to get a quick head change, take the edge off, or think that, well, it's not actually alcohol. So, yeah, I mean, it's out there. People are doing it, and it's scary and sad, but it's about, what is it about people that's making them go in that direction in the first place?
What's your opinion on Breaking Bad?
The show Breaking Bad?
Yeah. Did you like it? What's your opinion?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved that show. I it's not a trigger for me. It's a trip. Like in my first couple of years as Bridie, I don't know what it was. I was fascinated by going on YouTube and watching somebody smoke meth, and it definitely made me kind of during that time. It was kind of triggering, but then over a period of time, I just, things evolved and things changed and my mentality changed, and I just don't want to do drugs anymore. But I remember, when Breaking Bad came out, I'm like, of course they're going to make a TV show that's based around the story of my life, in a sense. A lot of stuff that was going on in there, it was, on the big screen, it's more, Hollywoody, but it was very well made, well made, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I still watch it from time to time.
It's a good show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, does anyone else have any questions? We're running pretty long here. This is a great talk. Oh, we just got one in. Started on Vicodin, then started snorting oxys, then smoked them, and then they changed the something.
And then they changed the... Can't see...
Changed the what? Oh, there it is. Changed the formula. I went to heroin. Surprised how many people had OxyContin in their house.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, a couple years ago, that documentary Behind the Orange Curtain came out. Did you watch that?
Oh yeah, I know all about it.
There's one thing in there that has stuck with me that I was just blown away by. That people would go to open houses and raid the medicine cabinets there and take pain medication and all these different
just
things.
Like Bob's saying right there.
Addiction.
Yeah, it's in people's. I'll bet you there's still some old school OxyContin that people never ate in people's houses as we speak.
Well, sure. And I mean, kids growing up, they go over to their friend's house, or maybe some of them go over to other people's grandparents' house who have all this stuff, and it's just
these kids,
so accessible.
Kids these days glorify Xanax bars, call them Xanny bars.
I know there's rappers that sing.
Yeah, they glorify that stuff like we used to glorify like a big bud of weed. Like for us, a big bud of weed looked enticing. These days, kids say that about Xanax. It's like really cool to have a lot of Xanny bars. At the end of the day, it basically kills your anxiety. But I'm happy I never got into that stuff.
Yeah.
How do you get out of a K-hole if you're stuck in one? Well, for one, you just go sit in the corner. I know I've been in a K-hole. Ketamine.
Heard some stories.
It's a whole other world. I say you just go and lay down, and when you get out of it, you don't go back into it. I think you could definitely warp your mind with that stuff. It's only intended for cats and oxes.
Yeah,
it's a tranquilizer. It's supposed to put down an animal.
It's like a horse tranquilizer, right? Well, here's a
what's your opinion on
question?
My opinion on Suboxone. Great question. Thank you, Luke, for asking this question. Suboxone is not sober. That's what we say, amongst friends, definitely, and colleagues. Suboxone is not sober. Suboxone is the modern day. What was it? Suboxone is
Methadone.
The modern day methadone, but it doesn't get you high, but it can get you high depending on the person. So Suboxone is intended to get you off of opiates. You're supposed to take it like there's supposed to be a taper. My opinion is that it should be used, so that you don't go through all the pain and all that, but get off of it soon. Anywhere from a 3 to 7 day taper, 10 at the most, But anything more than that, Suboxone maintenance, I don't believe in it. I don't think it's effective. I don't think that you have the chance to get true sobriety if you're stuck on Suboxone. There's a lot of doctors that put their patients on MAT. To each their own. I'm not a fan of it. I don't think that people need to continue or claim that they're in recovery if they're on Suboxone. There's a chance, obviously if you've tried to do opiates, there's going to be a backlash to that. You either get off the opiates for good and do your Suboxone to get off of them, but know what Suboxone was intended for. It's not intended for you to be on it long term.
Gotcha. I hope that answered your question. Does anyone have any other questions before we wrap this amazing episode up today?
It's been a great show.
It really has. Time has flown by. Oh my gosh, we're at 35 minutes already.
Yeah.
We could keep this going forever. The history of drugs, it's endless.
Luke,
talks.
we'll talk about
this.
that later when I see you. The replacement therapy. Yep.
Gotcha. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again so much for joining us on episode 13 of the Sober Grind podcast.
Baby.
Once again, please subscribe to this podcast. You can find the link to iTunes in the description of this. We are also on Google Play and YouTube. All of these are recorded and then posted on there later.
Also, Ask an Addiction Specialist.
Yes.
We have a page on Facebook. It's a group, right?
The link's also in the description.
That's right. The link's in the description, and you can go in the top bar and type in Ask an Addiction Specialist. Come and join us on there. You can ask anything you want. For a loved one, if you're suffering with addiction, if you were suffering with addiction, come and help someone. People ask questions. We can answer questions, or, it's open to anybody. Just come and sign in to Ask an Addiction Specialist. We will approve you if we deem you be fit.
Are you worthy? Just kidding. Pretty much anyone. We'll approve you.
Yeah,
if you want.
we'll approve you. So come in and talk to us, all right?
Join
Thank
us, hang out, and last but not least, this podcast is, of course, brought to you by Beginnings Treatment Center. They make this all possible. They offer all levels of care and are located in beautiful and sunny Southern California. If you are interested and would love to learn more and speak to a friendly addiction specialist, give them a call at 800-387-6907 or go directly to their website at beginningstreatment.com.
I have one more thing I want to tap in there.
Lay it out.
We have an intervention training April 13th, 14th,
Yes.
and 15th in Orange County, California.
I can't wait.
It will be conducted by Earl Hightower. He will be teaching people how to become interventionists. If you're interested in becoming an interventionist, please, you can go ahead and call me at 949-751-7761. I can give you all the deets, and we can get you involved, and we can get you signed up. There are some
Legendary
open
Earl
seats.
Hightower.
Yes.
Don't miss this opportunity.
Thanks for everybody for tuning in, and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Pej.